Black Myth Wukong. I think it's safe to say that the hype surrounding this game has sparked a little bit of a fascination within it. In just the first week alone, Black Myth Wukong surpassed the highest concurrent playing count for a single player game of all time on Steam. That's literally insane. It's safe to say that this game, without a shed of a doubt, is one of the best pieces of media that has came out this year. The art style, the characters, the story, and the combat all come together to create a very detailed work of art. But, like all things, it is not perfect. How y'all doing today? My name is Pucchi and I am your residential brown-skinned nerd on the internet. Today we're going to talk about Wukong. If you're new here, this is a video series I like to call Actual Criticism, and if you can't tell by the title, I usually give actual criticism. This is a video series where I try to dissect video games with as much of an unbiased view as possible. The reason is I feel like with modern games, most reviewers today have some sort of stake inside of the race. I'm here to try and dive straight through the noise and give an actual analysis of the game. Now I'd like to get this out of the way early. I will be discussing negative aspects about the game. I'm a firm believer that all games can improve in some type of way and no game is perfect. And despite the cult of personality that this game has developed, Wukong is no exception to that. So if you're watching this video with the mindset of hating and arguing because I critiqued your favorite piece of plastic, that's fine, but odds are I'm probably just going to ignore you. However, if you're here to have a genuine conversation, I fully support that. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about it. One of the main praises that I actually have for this game is ironically also one of the biggest things that holds it back. And that is the game takes a lot of inspiration from old school video games. For example, the secret area after the rat fight in chapter 2, all it took was for one person to tweet and all of a sudden the entire culture shifted within Wukong. Wukong takes from that older experience by relying on the word of mouth as well as the internet to learn about these secrets. This old school nature is what really gives this game its unique vibe, but it also holds it back because, well, like, it feels outdated, it feels old. To elaborate on what I mean by that, this game feels like it has an identity crisis. At all points, Wukong feels like it's trying to pull from so many different gaming mechanics and genres that it ends up doing things well, but not exceptionally well. It's definitely attempting to be a jack of all trades but a master of none, which for Game Science's first major release, that's actually insanely impressive. But there are things that need some adjustments. For starters, the map is both really good and really not that great at all. Let me explain. One of Black Myth Wukong's biggest charms is, like we stated before, it plays like an old school linear action game. However, despite the gameplay and not feeling like a return to the old school, it still tries to incorporate elements from modern gaming, such like its level design. Level design is something that's usually perfected after years and years of practice within a studio. Despite how great Wukong is, the developers show some of their inexperience on how they handle certain aspects of their level design inside of this game. Generally speaking, in a linear game, the map should flow and guide your eyes like a painting. You should never be lost within the game. Within a linear game, there is one direction to go, forward, and your eyes need to be able to see that at all points. The problem with Wukong is that they painted this Mona Lisa, and all of a sudden somebody threw tomato sauce on it during a protest. The result of this is just this beautiful artwork that's kind of being tainted by this stuff that should have been cleaned up. And that thing that should have been cleaned up is the invisible walls. Those invisible walls are the biggest issue with the level design in this game. Before long, it feels like you're walking into walls every 2 minutes because, well, you are walking into walls every 2 minutes. The problem in this game isn't that invisible walls exist. Every game has them. But it's the frequency that they're placed within Wukong. And it wasn't just me that had an issue with this. It took me around 2 seconds of looking on the internet to see that people had literal compilations and meme videos of themselves running into invisible walls into this game. If it happens so much that people can literally make a compilation of it, that's bad. You're constantly hitting walls, making it hard to tell which areas are explorable and which aren't. This is only amplified by the fact that explorable areas look almost identical to those blocked by invisible walls. There are no visual cues to indicate the path is blocked. Zero. None. You literally just have to walk forward and eventually hit an invisible wall, or you just keep going. The game doesn't make a visual distinction between paths that you can explore and paths that you can't explore. This is not a good level design. This is very much an easy path for me to go down. They literally left this wide open. And unless later on in this chapter I'm able to go this way, this is honestly kind of annoying. Because I run into this like 10 times every session that I'm in. It's not a rare occurrence. This happens all the time. You couldn't have just made one more rock right here to prevent me from going this way?
A few minutes later.
Oh my God, it happened again. Do you see what I mean? Literally, I am not joking when I say this happens all the time. And you're gonna look at me with a straight face and say that the developers literally just put an invisible wall here? And not only that, it doesn't just end with the exploration as well. It goes into the combat. There were several instances in this game where either I got stuck because of an invisible wall or an invisible wall prevented me from hitting the boss, resulting in me dying. This specific clip that I'm about to show is from towards the end of the game, so if you care about spoilers, go ahead and skip that part down in the chapters, you can see it. But the walls and the invisible walls are prevalent all the way till the end of the game. I'm stuck! I'm in the middle of a boss fight and an invisible wall literally made it to where I lost half my fucking health when I should have been killing. That's annoying. Now, me personally, I didn't find this game too hard. After that, I literally just went back and killed him. But the fact is if you are having a really hard time on this game and you got him that low and you died to an invisible wall, I would flip out. Even the final boss in chapter 2 during the sand region, instead of giving an actual visual indicator that is better than literal sandstorms going around you, because sand, I don't know if you guys know this, sand isn't really that good of a barrier for your eyes to see, on top of the fact that the boss is literally throwing sand strikes, as well as the fact that you are literally in a desert, which results in you not being able to hit the boss in the second chapter because of the invisible walls, on top of the fact that the hitboxes are pretty iffy, but we're going to get to that later in the video. Now, is this the end of the world for the game? Not at all. It's just very annoying. But the bottom line is that the developer's decision to overuse invisible walls instead of creating a distinguishable layout where players can visually tell which areas are inaccessible lowers the overall quality of the level design. It's that simple. Anything in excess is bad, and invisible walls are no different. Wukong's over-reliance on them turns an amazing world into a frustrating guessing game of which pathways are secret areas and which are just brick walls that you walk into. We're going to get into it later on inside of the video in the next section, but when I got to chapter 6, I was done exploring. I don't want a guessing game where I'm trying to figure out which path is the right one and which one is an invisible wall. I would like to be able to know which ways to go without being tricked, and there's one way to be able to do that. Now, when you think of linear games, you're thinking of games like Uncharted, BioShock, or like Metal Gear Solid. They're notorious for offering a direct path through their stories. If things work how they're supposed to, players should be able to finish most of the game in a directly straight line. As we all know, Black Myth Wukong has been labeled a linear game. Can you do that in Black Myth Wukong? Absolutely fucking not. The developers say it's a linear action game, but in practice, it plays drastically more like a semi-open world game, and it's not even funny how blatant it plays like a semi-open world game. And if I were to put more semi-open world games on the screen once again, they'd look exactly similar to Wukong. However, if you compare all of these semi-open world games to Wukong, there's one major thing that separates them. Wukong doesn't have a map. Like I stated before, this is because the game has an identity crisis. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Now, I'm going to use this game to compare it to Wukong, not in the sense that it's a better game, but because it's a linear game. It's an actual linear game. Space Marine 2. When you travel through the jungle in that game, the world looks amazing. Just like in Wukong, however, the difference is that Space Marine 2 is a true linear experience. There are almost no areas to venture outside of the main story, like I stated before. In Wukong, the environments are much more open compared to Space Marine 2. While Space Marine 2 has a closed-off linear experience where you can't really go anywhere other than where the game tells you to go with your eyes, Wukong makes your eyes wander to areas that look traversable, but may not be. And I want to state something. The game isn't worse because of this. Plenty of games offer a similar format to Wukong, but the problem is that those games aren't linear action games. In Space Marine 2, if I try to go anywhere else I'm not supposed to, they'll use a simple visual cue to guide me, like bushes or barriers thing. But if I see this in the game, my brain goes, I cannot go there, offering a linear experience. Wukong doesn't do that. Instead of having clear roadblocks that are supposed to divert your eyes, you're met with invisible walls. But it's really not the game's fault, because at the end of the day, it's really not a linear game. Semi-open world games do this all the time. But the problem is that they usually have a map that helps you see which areas are explorable. Wukong suffers from being a really good semi-open world while trying to maintain its label as a linear game. It's better to commit to one thing than try to do everything all at once. Instead of feeling like a genuine guided linear adventure, you're often left confused about where to go next. And the final cherry on top about this game not being a linear game is that when Chapter 6 I might get some hate for this, but I think Chapter 6 is arguably the worst chapter inside of the entire game as far as gameplay goes. The story, obviously, it's amazing, but you get to Chapter 6 and everything that's wrong with the game gets really highlighted. The second you start Chapter 6, you are immediately given the Nimbus Cloud. Obviously, that's not its actual name. I just kind of forgot it off the top of my head. But you get it. And this game that claims to be a linear game lets you ride on it and explore this entire ginormous region in Chapter 6 with no visual indicators on where to go. This is supposed to be a linear game. That's what they claim this is supposed to be. The exploration in Chapter 6 is the worst out of the entire game because you genuinely have no idea where to go. It has that issue. I think that in order for them to properly fix that, they need to commit to whichever one they want to do. Is this going to be a linear game? Okay, add the visual indicators that prevent people from being able to explore certain areas when they're not supposed to. Is this supposed to be a semi-open world game? Simple, add a map. And even then, one thing that Chapter 6 really does highlight is the last problem I have with the game. Now, I really wish that I could give more extensive details on this section, but the bottom line is that it's very self-explanatory. The hitboxes just really are not that good. The majority of the time when a game has a bad hitbox issue, it usually means that the bosses within the game hit you in a location where they really shouldn't be able to hit you. In Wukong, it's literally the exact opposite. There wasn't any time where I felt that my character was getting hit unfairly, but the bosses themselves felt like they were changing their bodies to certain points like an old school anamorphic book. It's insane. The first boss that I really felt this from was the Black Bear Guai in Chapter 1, which is fairly early in the game. So I'm simply just going to show gameplay of the Black Bear Guai fight, and the miss counter on the top left is going to show how many combos I miss inadvertently just because the boss just changes shape. And the important thing that you need to understand is that the majority of these misses are done right in front of the boss. There's no way I should be missing these. The game just decides that I shouldn't be able to do that. Initially, I thought it was because the boss was big. However, in the Erlong fight, it does the same exact thing. Your attacks literally just miss even though he's right in front of you. At this point, I think you kind of get the idea, but the bottom line is that the hitboxes are insanely inconsistent, especially when you use your actual special abilities, and it really does make just for a very frustrating gameplay experience to miss things that I know for a fact I should be hitting. It's unfortunate, but I do think that if they were to solidify on what they want to do inside of this game, either I should be able to hit more consistently if I can only lock onto one section, or allow me to lock onto multiple sections. That alone would be able to at least make it more fair with the hitboxes, because some of these bosses in this game genuinely feel like I'm fighting Casper the Friendly Ghost because my hits are just going straight through them. They need to commit to one. Either I can lock on to multiple points of the body, or make it to where I have a little more leaping distance inside of some of my attacks, or, you know, make the hitboxes bigger. Like some of these bosses genuinely just do not get hit. They were really close to making around a 9 out of 10 game, but a few things just got left behind. Hitboxes in particular should be one of the most consistent things that you do inside of a linear action game above all else. It is supposed to be the game's bread and butter. There are games that came out here that did combat better than Wukong. For example, Stellar Blade, in my opinion, has the best combat as far as like swordplay and actual the entire year. I think if game science can kind of tune in on their hitboxes similar to how Stellar Blade had it, I do think that the game would be much better. And like I stated before, I think that the identity crisis is the biggest red flag for this game. Instead of committing to either a semi-open world game or a linear style, it creates kind of a hodgepodge of both genres, resulting in a game that's good, but since it's a mix, a game that is missing crucial elements from a genre that could aid the game, which results in it being a lesser version of both. And I really want to double down on that. If they commit to it, it will be better. But other than that, I do think that most things of this game are very good. Very similar to the majority of games that have released this year, other than Astrobot, apparently, which I haven't got a chance to play, but I am going to review that the second I can. But like I said, every game this year has come out around 8 out of 10, and this game is no different, in my opinion. How high that 8 is very much going to be a personal preference thing, but there are actual criticisms about Black Myth Wukong that I do think people need to start talking about. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Did any of you guys run into these issues at all? Do some of you guys think that these issues really aren't that big of a deal? Let me know. And if you enjoy a brown dude yapping about video games on the internet, don't forget to subscribe, because I do that all the time. I have no life. I am Pucchi, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.